The stars above Earth were no longer quiet. They were filled with warships, massive, dark, and cold. The Galactic Empire had arrived, and they came with power. Their ships stretched across the sky like a steel storm. At the center of this fleet was the Empire's flagship, Wrath of Order. Where Admiral Korvik stood on the command deck, arms behind his back, eyes locked on Earth's blue surface. "Send the warning," Korvik said calmly. His voice echoed in the silence of the bridge. "Let them know who we are." A younger officer pressed a button. A cold message traveled to Earth. "This is the Galactic Empire. Surrender now or be destroyed." Korvik gave a thin smile. "We give them one chance, then we crush them." Far below, on Earth, the skies began to change. Clouds turned red as the sunlight bent around the alien ships. People looked up from streets, schools, and cities. The sky wasn't blue anymore. It was shadowed by something ancient and angry. In the United Command Center. Buried deep under Earth's surface, the president stood, surrounded by generals and advisors. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "They think we'll be afraid," she said. A general stepped forward. "Should we respond?" The president shook her head. "No, let them wait." Above the Earth, inside the human command ship Spirit of Steel, Captain Arya Lane stood with her crew. She looked calm to calm. She had seen the enemy's size, their numbers, their weapons. And yet, she smiled. A young pilot named Miles leaned back in his chair and laughed quietly. "So funny?" Arya asked. Miles grinned. "They brought all that metal." "For us." Within minutes, the room was filled with quiet laughter. "They don't know, do they?" someone said. "Nope," Miles replied. "They think we're just Earth." Captain Arya walked to the window and looked out. The enemy fleet stretched across the stars like a wall. But she wasn't afraid. None of them were in space. The Empire waited for Earth's reply. But there was only silence. Admiral Korvik frowned. "Still nothing," he asked. "No signal?" "Admiral, total silence," the officer replied. Korvik turned his gaze back to the screen. "Then they're either fools or they're hiding something." He stepped closer to the center of the room. "Prepare to fire a single shot. Something small, just enough to shake them." The crew obeyed. One long-range plasma missile was armed. The target, an uninhabited area in the Atlantic Ocean. Just a warning, back on Earth. The Spirit of Steel received the launch signal. "They're firing," said a tech officer. "Plasma missile." Heading straight toward us, Arya didn't flinch. She just nodded, shields up. The missile blazed through space, cutting across the sky like a glowing arrow. It hit Earth's shield with a loud flash, and then it disappeared. No sound, no explosion, not even a ripple in the ocean. The crew of the Empire's flagship stared at their screens in silence. "Direct hit?" asked Korvik. "Yes, sir." But the officer stopped. "But what?" the Admiral snapped. "There's nothing. No damage, no readings. It just vanished." Korvik stepped forward slowly. "That's impossible. Nothing just disappears." On the Spirit of Steel, the crew watched the screen as the energy from the blast faded into nothing. Then Arya smiled again. "Did they really think that would work?" she said. Miles shook his head. "They don't get it. They think we're new to war." Arya turned toward her communications officer. "Open a line. One message." The officer nodded. "Line is open." Arya leaned forward and spoke clearly. "You fired first," she said. "Now it's our turn." Every screen in the enemy armada showed the face of the calm human commander. Admiral Korvik's face turned red. "Trace that signal," he barked. The officer stared in confusion. "Admiral, it didn't come from Earth." "Then where?" The officer hesitated. "It came from behind us." Korvik's eyes widened. He turned to the rear-view screen. Out of the dark side of the moon, dozens of human ships began to rise. They weren't large, they weren't loud, but they moved like ghosts. No energy trails, no shields raised, just motion slow, silent, and full of purpose. Korvik stepped back. For the first time, he felt something cold in his chest. It wasn't fear, it was confusion. "How did we not see them?" he asked. No one answered. The human ships continued to rise. They made no threats, no weapons locked on. They simply approached, calm and quiet. And then one of the human ships blinked its lights twice. Miles smiled. They're signaling. It's a joke. A welcome. Korvik stared at the blinking light. What kind of creatures joke during war? Back on Earth, the president received the report. They fired the first shot, the general said. The president nodded. And now the general smiled faintly. Now they get to see what Earth laughs at. The skies above Earth were still filled with enemy ships, but the fear was gone. Humans had seen worse, survived worse, built their power in silence. The Empire had come to scare humanity. Instead, they had made us laugh, and now it was our turn to speak. The stars above Earth were still crowded with the warships of the Galactic Empire. But something had changed. Admiral Korvik stared at the screen on the bridge of his massive flagship. His face was tight with confusion. They didn't even fire, he said quietly. They just ... appeared. Behind the moon, dozens of human ships hovered in silence. They were smaller than the Empire's battleships, less flashy, less intimidating. But they moved with purpose. And Korvik could feel it. There was something strange about them, something wrong. He turned to his second-in-command. How did they get behind us? We don't know, sir, the officer said. They were cloaked, maybe, or hiding underground. Korvik clenched his jaw. The Empire has mapped every system in this sector. We know every planet, every base, every outpost. These ships, he paused. These ships were never reported. Then a new message flashed across their screens. One sentence. Human language. Korvik felt the cold rise again in his chest. On the Spirit of Steel, Earth's flagship Captain Arya Lane stood calmly. The room around her buzzed with quiet energy. Her crew wasn't afraid. They were focused, the tech officer said. They're trying to scan us. Arya smiled. Let them. The Empire's sensors tried to lock onto the human fleet, but the readings made no sense. Some ships didn't register at all. Others looked like floating metal debris. One read as a piece of ice. Another showed radiation patterns of a dead moon. They're jamming us, Korvik growled. No, sir, the officer said. They're not hiding anything. That's just how they read. It's like their tech is bending light. Energy. Time. Korvik's eyes narrowed. What kind of war machines play tricks? On the human bridge, Miles chuckled again. They're trying to make sense of us. Arya nodded. Good luck to them. She leaned forward. Bring the grav mirrors online. The crew obeyed. Silent, precise. Above Earth, the sky shimmered. It looked like light bending, like the air itself was warping. Even the stars seemed to move. In space, the Empire's sensors went wild. Weapons locked onto targets that vanished. Enemy positions changed every second. Ships appeared and disappeared. Lasers missed. Missiles locked on friendly ships. Korvik stood frozen. Admiral, a voice shouted, we're losing formations. On the screen, several Empire cruisers started drifting off course. No damage, no attack, just confusion. Then another human message flashed across the Empires. Command deck, you brought weapons. We brought illusions. Korvik slammed his fist on the console. I want all ships to fire. Full spread, erase the sky. The order echoed across the fleet. Dozens of plasma beams shot into space. Missiles launched, railguns roared. And then, everything vanished. No impact, no sound, no explosion, just silence. Someone whispered, back on the Spirit of Steel. Arya watched calmly. They're scared now, Miles said. Arya nodded. They should be, one of her officers asked. Should we fire? Arya shook her head. No. Let them think. Let them feel helpless first. In the Empire's fleet, panic spread like fire. Their ships were powerful, yes, but useless in the face of tricks and silence. They had never fought enemies like this. Korvik turned toward his war council. We have thousands of ships, he said, more firepower than 10 planets. And yet, they haven't fired once. The room was quiet, he went on. They are laughing at us. Why? No one answered. A whisper moved through the ranks. Maybe they don't need weapons. Suddenly, alarms rang out. One of the Empire's destroyers began spinning in space hits, engines disabled. Not destroyed, just off then. Another ship. Lost power? Then another. Systems failed, with no attack. No damage, just lights flickering. Control panels going dark. Korvik's face turned pale. he asked. Unknown, the tech said. It's like their presence alone is breaking our systems. Another message appeared. Power means nothing if you don't know how to use it. On Earth, the president stood before her war table. She didn't look proud. She looked tired. We warned them, she said. We showed them silence. They answered with threats. One general said, they still don't understand us. No, she replied. They think strength is noise and fire, but real power is quiet. In space, the Empire was breaking. Admiral Korvik watched as another of his ships powered down. He turned to his council. We must regroup, pull back, call reinforcements, prepare for second strike. One of his senior officers shook his head. Sir, if we retreat, the Empire will call it weakness. Korvik looked out the window. What do you call this? And then the human fleet moved. Not fast, not aggressive. Just slow, steady approach. A human fighter flew right by an Empire destroyer. No attack, just a pass. Like it was saying, we could destroy you. But we won't. Not yet. Korvik's hands trembled. What are they? He whispered, back on the Spirit of Steel. Arya Lane received the new scan results. 30% of their ships are already down, an officer reported. We fired no weapons. Arya nodded. Prepare the message. The communications officer opened a line. Her voice echoed across the galaxy. This was just the warm-up. The message was sent. Every ship received it. Every leader, every system and Earth's fleet stopped moving. No further actions. Just silence. Admiral Korvik stared at the screen. The message blinked again and again. Just the warm-up. He sat in his command chair. Slowly, they're not here to fight, he said. No one spoke. They're here to teach us a lesson. He looked down, and for the first time in his life, Admiral Korvik understood fear. True fear. Not from weapons, not from war, but from humans, who laughed at an empire and never had to raise their voice. And in that silence, Korvik finally gave the order he had never imagined giving. Retreat. But it was already too late. Admiral Korvik's voice was firm, but his eyes betrayed his fear. Order the retreat. All ships, pull back now. The command echoed across the Empire's fleet, but no one moved. Admiral, his communication officer said, voice trembling, our control systems, they're not responding. What do you mean? Korvik snapped. We can't steer. Engines are online. But it's like someone else is holding us in place. The human fleet was no longer advancing. It simply stood still, surrounding the Empire's armada like a silent wall. No weapons aimed, no threat spoken, and yet none of the Empire's ships could move. Check for tractor beams, Korvik ordered. None detected, sir, the officer replied. They're not holding us physically. Then how are they? A new alert blinked across the main screen. Incoming transmission. Human command ship, Spirit of Steel. Korvik hesitated, then nodded, put it through. The screen flickered, then showed the calm face of Captain Arya Lane. She stood with her hands behind her back, her voice even and quiet. You tried to scare us with numbers, she said. You tried to show us power, but all we saw were targets. And fear. She paused, letting the silence stretch. You fired first. Now you'll see how we defend ourselves. Then the screen went dark. Korvik looked around the bridge. Number 1 spoke, no one moved. Seconds later, the lights dimmed. First on one ship, then another, all across the Empire's fleet. Systems began to shut down. Weapons, shields, engines, lights. Nothing exploded. Nothing burned, but the ships were going dark one by one. Korvik shouted, get our systems back online, divert power, run diagnostics. But it was no use, one engineer whispered. They're not destroying us. They're disabling us. Korvik's FISTS tightened. How? How are they doing this? No one knew. Back on the Spirit of Steel, Captain Arya gave quiet orders. Her crew worked with precision, not panic. Their weapons were still cold. Their shields remained untouched. They hadn't even fired a shot. Status? She asked. A tech officer replied, 60% of enemy ships are down. The rest are... Glitching Arya nodded. No need for force. Keep the pressure. Miles leaned over his console and grinned. I think they're starting to believe in ghosts. Arya didn't smile. Good. Let the fear do the work. On Earth, in the United Command Center, The president stood in silence. A wall of screens showed the falling Empire ships. Generals around her stared in awe. One finally spoke. "Is this our victory?" The president's voice was quiet but firm. "This is their lesson." She stepped closer to the main screen. "We didn't come to destroy them, but they came to dominate us. They believed fear made them powerful." She looked at the flickering images of the dying fleet. They forgot what happens when you push humans too far. Back in space, Admiral Korvik stood at the center of a dying empire. His flagship still had power, barely, but outside, his proud fleet drifted like debris. "We underestimated them," he muttered. An officer looked up. "Admiral, should we send an apology?" Korvik looked stunned. "The Empire does not apologize." A loud snap echoed across the bridge as a console sparked. The officer calmly said, "Maybe it's time we start." Korvik didn't answer. Instead, he watched as another human ship passed close by. Again, no weapons. Watching, the humans were not laughing anymore. Now, they were silent. Cold, controlled, and that was far more terrifying. Suddenly, the Empire's emergency channel activated. A voice came through. "Not human, not Imperial, neutral, robotic. This is an automated transmission from the Human Strategic Command." The voice continued, "You are being returned to your territory. Your weapons have been disabled. Your command systems have been locked. Do not resist. We do not seek war. But we will not tolerate threats. Go home and remember what Earth showed you." And then, as if someone flipped a switch, the Empire's ships began to move. Not by their own engines, but through controlled pulses from the human fleet. Each ship was guided gently back in the direction they came from, like a child being sent home. After breaking the rules, Korvik watched in silence. All he could do was whisper, "What are they?" One of his younger officers answered softly, "They're not just humans anymore, sir. They're something more." Korvik's pride burned, but he said nothing. Back on the Spirit of Steel, Arya Lane turned away from the screen. She said, "But let the Galaxy remember this." Miles asked, "Should we record the transmission?" Arya nodded. "Let it play on every open channel." The message was simple. If you threaten Earth, you don't get war. You get silence. And silence is what comes before the end. The human fleet didn't cheer. There was no celebration because this wasn't a war they won, it was a warning they delivered. And across the stars, in every corner of the galaxy, leaders watched the broadcast. Alien empires, pirate kings, slave lords, colonizers, all of them saw the message, and all of them knew one thing. The humans had laughed at the Galactic Empire, and then they made the laughter stop. The once mighty fleet of the Galactic Empire drifted in silence, slowly pushed back into deep space. Their engines were still offline. Their weapons were dead. And their pride shattered. Admiral Korvik sat quietly in the command chair of the Wrath of Order. His hands no longer gripped the armrests. His voice no longer barked commands. He simply stared out the window, watching as the human ships floated nearby. They didn't follow. They didn't chase. They just hovered, like silent judges watching a retreating army. We didn't just lose, we were never in control. He leaned forward. Slightly, they knew everything: our formations, our tactics, even our blind spots. They waited behind the moon, behind our pride, and when they showed themselves, they didn't attack us. He paused. They dismantled us. The bridge was filled with shameful silence. Officers who had once laughed at Earth now lowered their eyes. They had called humans weak, primitive, unready for galactic politics. But now they were being escorted home, like criminals under guard. Across the stars, the Empire's retreat was being broadcast. Millions of alien species watched in stunned silence as images showed the powerless armada limping back through the void. Earth didn't celebrate that. There were no fireworks, no speeches, no triumphant music. Only a cold transmission played on loop. Let this be remembered. Earth does not seek war, but we are not afraid of it. In the heart of Earth's united command, the president stood before a wall of screens, showing hundreds of news feeds, each replaying the same footage: massive alien warships being gently returned to their borders. One general stepped forward. "We've done what we came to do. The galaxy saw everything." Another added, We didn't fire a single real weapon. The president nodded. That was the point. She turned toward the main feed, which showed Admiral Korvik's face, pale, tired. We wanted them to understand something, she said, that Earth is not prey. She paused, that silence is not weakness, and that human laughter is the last thing they should ever ignore. In a private room aboard the Wrath of Order, Admiral Korvik activated a secure channel to the Imperial High Council. He looked into the recording lens. This is Admiral Korvik of the 7th Armada. I submit my full report. He paused, then said, something no one expected. We underestimated them. He breathed in slowly. No, I underestimated them. I believed humans were young, emotional, unprepared for the galaxy. I was wrong. He looked straight into the camera. They are not savages. They are shadows. They fight with silence. They win with misdirection. They do not match our power. They make it irrelevant. He clenched his fist. We fired first. They were spotted with Control.com laughter. And when the laughter stopped, everything else did too. He leaned closer. We must not make this mistake again. In space, as the last Empire ship left Earth's system, the human fleet began to turn. Slowly, silently, it vanished into the darkness. No words, no messages, just quiet movement. On the Spirit of Steel, Captain Arya Lane stood with her crew. No one spoke. No one celebrated. Miles finally said, "They're gone." Arya nodded. Now, another officer added, "We could have destroyed them." "Yes," Arya replied, "but then we'd be like them." She turned toward the stars. Fear lasts longer than war. Elsewhere in the galaxy, leaders of other empires gathered. Some watched the footage with disbelief, others with terror, a few with curiosity. One insectoid warlord clicked his claws nervously. "We were preparing to test Earth's strength." A council member hissed, "Do you still want to?" The warlord stayed quiet. Another alien, tall and armored, growled softly. They turned back an empire, not with fire, but with laughter, with shadows, with technology no one else understands. "Do we challenge them?" someone asked. "No," the warlord said finally. "We listen, we learn, and we never ever laugh at humans again." Back on Earth, news anchors tried to explain the event to billions of people. One reporter said, "We didn't fight a war. We played a game of strategy, and we won before it began." Another added, "For the first time in galactic history, an empire retreated without a single human casualty." Citizens around the world watched with awe, confusion, and pride. A child looked up at her father and asked, "Why didn't we destroy them?" The father smiled gently, "Because we're not monsters." Inside the abandoned orbit where the battle never happened, a single message probe remained floating. Its signal blinked every few minutes, sending one repeating message across space. Earth is peaceful. Earth is quiet. But Earth is never unprepared. It became known as the last warning. Every starfaring species heard it, and they remembered. Back on the Wrath of Order, Admiral Korvik received one final transmission before human systems fully cut off contact. It was audio only. 3 simple words, spoken in a calm human voice. "Now you understand." Korvik didn't reply. He simply sat in silence, staring into space, and though he was alone, he did something no one in the Empire had ever seen him do. He bowed his head, not in defeat, but in respect for the only species that had ever laughed in his face, and meant it.